I came across some literature on corporate social responsibility, which suggests that firms buy renewable energy at premiums and report environmental concerns as motivation to do so. They, the literature also suggests that this type of behavior even results in higher profit. However, a product differentiation framework, perfect competition, predicts that renewable energy use has no effect on profit. Another piece of research that I came through investigated the relationship between firms' renewable energy use and profit on the basis of panel data for 920 firms spanning between 2014 to 2018. They did not find evidence for the impact of renewable energy use on profit. Hence, a win-win in the form of high profit and a better environment does not seem to exist. In addition, the results appear to suggest that firms do not have a willingness to pay for renewable energy as a contribution to the environment. Now, this would imply that firms are only willing to contribute to climate change mitigation by buying renewable energy. This is aligned with a profit maximization objective. But I'm curious, is this really true? And can anything change what can seem to be a widely entrenched point of view that sustainable solutions need to come at the expense of profitability? And can sustainable solutions lead to predictable growth and scale? That's what we'll be unpacking today with our guest in just a moment. Hello and welcome to Predictable B2B Success podcast brought to you by sproutwith.com. I'm Vinay Koshy and our guest today is Gareth Evans. Gareth, you are the CEO and co-founder of Vector and committed to a mission of empowering businesses and communities to make the global transition towards energy sustainability and towards a more affordable, secure, and renewable energy future. Now, Vector, as I understand it, is an energy transition platform that delivers actionable on-site energy insights, access to vetted suppliers, so businesses can gain energy independence, save money, and be more sustainable. Now, you have been a leader pretty much your entire life. You've worked in charities, community organizations, sports teams, and even led the military operations. And you've parlayed these experiences to building teams and businesses now to challenge the planet's greatest challenges and opportunities, very much focusing on this energy transition piece. I'm curious, given your experiences, was there one in particular that stood out to you that led you down this path of building out Vector to what it is today?
Yeah, it's great to be here and a great intro. I think it highlights the confusion and complexity of the energy transition. So excited to unpack it with you. In terms of a catalyst moment, yeah, absolutely. And I probably didn't really realize at the time that it would lead to Vector. But back in 2009, I was working for one of the largest energy engineering firms in the world, Worley. At the time, it was called Worley Parsons. And I was asked to take on a role in Iraq supporting major oil and gas companies moving into the region following the Second Gulf War. So I was living on a US Army base in Basra, and we were doing environmental, social, and community liability assessments prior to the companies moving in. So we were the first Westerners on the ground there. And what I realized was here we were unlocking some of the biggest oil and gas reserves in the world to feed our energy-hungry businesses and economies. Like energy is the lifeblood of everything. Meanwhile, the local teams that were supporting us with our work were surviving on 2 to 4 hours of power a day. Those that could afford it had diesel gensets. Other people just had to experience these long periods of outages. And you can imagine the impact that has on people's lives. You're living in our Celsius talk, 30 to 40 degrees Celsius days, for US listeners, 120 degree plus, day in, day out, no air conditioning, no energy. How do you keep food fresh? It impacts education, access to water, access to transportation. It goes on and on. And we were being mortar attacked most evenings on the US base. And a lot of the intelligence was suggesting this wasn't insurgent style activity. This was local individuals being paid a couple of $100s to be able to feed their families, be able to buy diesel, afford gensets. And they weren't doing it because they were nasty people. They were doing it to survive. And it really highlighted to me the importance of reliable, affordable, secure energy. And it becomes a very slippery slope when we don't have access to that. And so that was a very interesting personal experience. And then over the years of working in this industry, seeing the impacts of not having access to that energy infrastructure for businesses and communities globally. It's quite significant and it's quite scary at the same time. We've seen recently with South Africa is what by all accounts is a fairly developed country. And yet their grid is now in complete chaos and they're experiencing 12-hour rolling blackouts. And that's leading to social unrest, increased crime, businesses not being able to operate. And so the energy genuinely is like the thing that keeps our businesses and communities going. And it's vital that we have the infrastructure in place to ensure that we continue to have access to that.
I'd love to dive deeper into that. I'm also curious, given your journey to date, what would you say would be your personal area of strength?
From like an energy perspective or a
personal perspective?
Yeah, my personal area of expertise is embracing ideas and opportunities and saying yes and taking on the most challenging opportunities and being able to build teams and businesses and commercial models around that to lock and scale opportunities that seem overwhelming to many. My whole life, I've kind of orientated towards taking on new adventures, putting my hand up for extreme assignments and challenging myself and my family personally and professionally. So that's what motivates me. And that's what's so exciting about the energy transition is we're going into the unknown. It hasn't been done before. It's a multi-decade long process. And we're disrupting an industry that's operated the same way for the last 100+ years. And so the status quo needs to be adjusted. And that takes a lot of education, grit, determination, innovation. And that's what's exciting.
In this area of strength, where you take on new challenges and push the boundaries, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
You touched on it in your intro. I think the misconceptions today in the market is that sustainability needs to come at the expense of profitability. And in fact, we see day in, day out when working with businesses around the world, that is often not the case. Actually, sustainable outcomes often lead to more profitable outcomes when developed in the right way. And I think today it's a very complex, a very confusing landscape. And I have huge empathy for business leaders because energy is one of many components they've got to think about. But what they are experiencing is escalating energy costs, which are eroding their margins, impacts to energy reliability, which impact their ability to operate their facilities, meet customer demands. And now there's huge pressure to be doing things more sustainably, whether that's from the capital markets, whether it's from the stock markets, their boards, their CEOs, right down to their employees. And so there's so many competing needs, a lot of pressure to enact an opportunity. But I'd say we've up until now had access to reliable and affordable energy. Grid has served us well for the last 100 years, but is not going to serve as well for the next 100 years. So that is the risk and the opportunity for businesses moving forward. Is with any transition, there's winners and losers. Right now, there's a lot of people frozen in indecision, and they will fall on the wrong side of that equation.
I know we've talked about the energy transition, and I'm just conscious of the fact that many listeners, while probably aware of the conversations around the ESG, may not necessarily understand the term energy transition. So I was wondering if you could define that for us in order just to clear that up as we go further into this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. In the simplest terms, today we generate our energy from big centralized power plants, whether that be coal, gas, solar, wind, nuclear. And then through the power of the energy industry magic, that energy is transmitted down long transmission lines, then converted into low voltages and distributed to our homes and businesses. And typically the old grid is fossil powered, centralized, and then we are passive consumers of that energy. The energy transition will lead us from that to a future where energy will be more distributed in nature. So more local generation, smaller assets, cleaner, more renewable, less regulated. And so this is the energy transition we're going on. How do we move from fossil fuel powered centralized generation to more renewable, or hybrid solutions that are smaller in nature, but more distributed, and we're generating and using energy right where we need it, versus today we actually suffer a huge amount of losses through that generation and transmission process.
Yeah.
And today we're all passive consumers of that energy. So we have no control over where it's generated, how it's generated, even when we'll get it, what we should pay for it. So we need to move more towards being prosumers of that energy solution. So there's some of the high level concepts of the energy transition.
So for businesses, would you say that
Yep.
all businesses need to be rather proactive about making this energy transition, or is it really meant for perhaps big energy consumers?
Yeah. We see across the board that the energy transition applies to everyone. But I'd say there are certain geographies, there's certain utility models, there's certain commercial models that you may be exposed to that will impact how quickly you need to address this. So we see in some jurisdictions, energy rates have gone up 30, 40, 50% year on year. Trying to manage a business when you're experiencing those escalating energy costs is impossible. It's eroding your margins. You have to pass on those costs, or you have to eat into your profitability. In some regions, they're very exposed to power outages. Where you're based in Australia, they've become increasingly prominent. Here in the US, California with the wildfires, Texas this week, very hot temperatures, so more air conditioning, more cooling, massive stress on the grid. They're experiencing outages. Places that experience hurricanes, that Florida, the southeast of the US. So, and you saw in Europe last year with the war, the lack of gas was leading to power outages. So outages are becoming more prominent in people's minds. And that's largely due to the energy infrastructure that we've all come to rely on is now in some cases 50, 70, 100 years old. So it's older, harder to maintain, less reliable. It's not designed for the energy demands that we're putting on it today. And then some businesses have made carbon reduction commitments. And so certainly for those businesses, they have to be doing something. But I'd say we often see there are 3 pain points or opportunities that businesses want to address: manage my costs, manage my reliability or security of energy, and manage my emissions. And then based on where they're located, how they consume energy today, what they pay for it, how much space they have to deploy an energy solution, these all influence what the opportunity would be. And that's certainly how we really drive to support customers in this market today. Is there's thousands of options in terms of suppliers, technology types, lots of different variables to consider. Our customers, the business leaders, your listeners, do not want to have to think about any of that. They just want, what are my options? What is the best solution for me? And how do I get it without having to be an energy expert? And this is part of the challenge in the market today: is 1, education, and 2, simplification. It feels complex. It feels hard. We need to remove that barrier to entry and allow businesses to get access to the right solutions for them at the right price, in the right time. And the other misconception I think a lot of businesses don't realize is they actually don't have to necessarily pay any upfront capital for these solutions. There are amazing capital providers in the market that want to be able to come in, pay for them, operate them, maintain them, and just sell you energy on a monthly basis at less than what you pay your utility today. And so the opportunities are incredible.
Very interesting. And a few questions come to mind, but perhaps let's just start with this one. I don't have the experience of looking at energy solution for a business, but I know not too long ago, we put solar panels up on our roof. And it was an interesting process because we had to weed through what a lot of providers were claiming in order to try and get at some level of truth and figure out what would be more appropriate for our energy consumptions, as opposed to a vanilla flavored, do this and you'll be right kind of attitude. I would imagine it's a similar, or I would say not dissimilar process for most businesses, in that the most convenient solutions, perhaps putting solar panels on your roof, may logically seem to be the best way forward, but may not be the best given where a particular business is located. And I'm just thinking of perhaps a business in the UK where they don't get as much sunshine as we do over here in Queensland and in Australia. You then start thinking about other alternatives, such as wind-powered solutions, etc. which has ramifications on your neighbors. And the challenge of perhaps putting something feasible up may not be that easy. So how do we figure out what is actually possible and feasible given the kind of information that's available?
Yeah, you've actually hit the nail on the head in terms of the pain point for a lot of
Mhm.
business leaders. So yeah, we specialize in what we call on-site energy. So we always advise customers, businesses in particular, from an energy transition perspective, you want to try and reduce your energy consumption as much as possible first. So that's done through energy efficiency. Then you want to generate and store energy at your location through an on-site energy solution. That's what we really specialize in. And only then you want to look at other alternatives of carbon offsets. And so from an on-site energy and energy efficiency perspective, your personal experience, now magnify that out across a business, potentially with hundreds or thousands of assets around the world, or even just the one. They are experiencing suppliers trying to sell them a widget or a service every day. Buy my solar panels, buy my batteries, buy my wind turbines. And what that leads to is a very significant information asymmetry. The energy buyer doesn't know enough. The energy suppliers know too much, and they will try and sell you what is in their best interests, not necessarily what's in your best interests. And then like you described, you're now trying to compare apples, oranges to pears, and it's overwhelming. And often that just leads to indecision because it just feels too hard. You don't know how to compare them. And so that leads to no action. And then that's no good for anyone because now the suppliers all have a really high cost of sale. Someone's got to pay for that at some point. So the poor person who ends up contracting them at some point is paying for all the lost sales that have gone before them. And you've wasted time and energy. And we speak to many business leaders who have wasted 6, 12, 24 months going down this route, never making a decision because they just never feel like they can trust the outcome. And what we firmly believe in is that there are lots of great options out there. We take a really independent, solution agnostic approach to this. So our customer, we represent their best interests. And we look at the hundreds of thousands of variables that impact a business case. Where are they located? How do they consume energy? Where do they buy it from today? Does it cost them? What are the potential escalation factors that they're going to experience in the future? What are the costs of gas, solar ratings potential, wind speeds, all these variables? And then we look at all commercially viable technologies, solar, wind, storage, gas, diesel, electric vehicles, fuel cells. And we say, what is the optimal configured solution to match their desired business outcome, whether that's cost reduction, resilience, and or emissions. And then we say to them, here's the optimal system for you. Now they're in control of the process. They can now use our technology to put a request for proposal into the market and say to the suppliers, here's exactly what I want you to quote me. And so now they get apples to apples bids back. They can now compare, contrast, and make a very confident award. And because they've created that competitive tension in the market, they get the best outcome in terms of price, in terms of product. And so now from having the situation where you're trying to compare and contrast many suppliers trying to sell to you, you are driving the process and you have 3 decision points. Am I interested in this? Yes, this looks like a nice solution for me. Now what's the right provider to service that? And so our platform facilitates that end to end. And then we make sure we monitor and verify the asset performs as it's been promised by the supplier to make sure that your interests are being met. And then they can manage performance guarantees, warranties, things like that. So it's essentially your energy transition partner and your cheapest insurance premium you could ever buy, because these aren't cheap systems. And like we said before, the opportunity of using the marketplace is that you can also go to people who will buy and finance these systems for you and then sell you what's called an energy as a service contract. So whatever energy you need, they'll sell you. They deal with all the financial mechanisms behind the scenes. You just get a bill on a monthly basis, and it's super simple, super easy. And with a lot of the incentives in the market, these systems are now extremely price competitive and attractive.
Very interesting. I'm curious, but it's one thing to look at energy transition from a corporate social responsibility perspective. But as you said, the energy available from the grid is getting more expensive. So there's some motivation now to look at solutions. But what about overall profitability? Are you seeing businesses are looking at this as a bit of a competitive advantage for their business? If so, what does it look like?
Yep. Yeah, I'll give you a few case studies, actually. I don't know whether you recall a cold snap that hit Texas several years ago. It knocked out the power
Mhm.
to the grid there.
Yep.
Samsung actually experienced and they publicly announced this, a $270 million cost impact to their business as a result of losing power for that week. So they had to shut down their facility. They obviously couldn't produce. They missed customer demands. So that's like an extreme version of that. Delta was another one who, as a result of a power outage, it knocked out all their software systems. They couldn't operate their business. They lost a huge amount of money. So from a mitigation perspective, on-site energy brings operational certainty such that you don't suffer those losses. From a profitability perspective, we did 2 assessments just in the last 2 weeks, one for a large steel manufacturing facility, one for a large winery. The winery, they'd seen their costs escalate just in the last year alone from $800,000 a year to $1.2 million. And with the deployment of a solar plus storage on-site energy system, they'll be able to save $450,000 a year and reduce their emissions by over 30%. And so these are not insignificant numbers that we're talking about. We're working with a large defense contractor who looked at a wind, solar, storage, and EV solution. Their opportunity was in excess of $450,000 of savings a year. And these systems are there for 20, 30 years. So you're now looking at millions of dollars worth of cost savings. You're not at the mercy of the utility escalation. So without even factoring that the energy is going to continue to go up, these are savings just on the basis of today's rates. And then you combine that with the fact that MSCI says that there's a 27% difference in market cap between the companies that have reduced their emissions versus those that have increased them in terms of stock price. So once you start adding all these factors on, I'm not going to lose product. I'm not going to lose revenue. I'm going to not be at the exposure of cost escalations. I can reduce my costs. I can increase my stock price. I can attract good talent. I can win more customer contracts. The profitability factor goes through the roof. And particularly on the manufacturing side of the industry, we are seeing this aggressively as the main buyers are pushing down the food chain. You have to be more sustainable. Otherwise, you're not going to win our contracts. And maybe whether you want to sell on the shelves of Walmart, it may be whether you want to produce the electric vehicle for Ford or Volvo. You're not going to win those contracts without showing that you've got access to sustainable infrastructure. Capital markets are demanding this. So new mine sites in Australia, they're particularly exposed to this unless they can show they've got a sustainable development strategy. They can't access good cost of capital. So once you start mounting these factors up, it becomes a very attractive business proposition.
And with this idea of making this transition, certainly cost is a factor. But what about scenarios where, say, you're in an industrial park and perhaps solar is not an option? Do you provide or recommend perhaps some legal solutions in order to help not just a company in the park who's interested in making the transition, but to find solutions that everyone else in the park would be happy with? Let's say wind was the option. Obviously, putting windmills on the top of your roof may not be the best way forward for the others in the park. So how do you navigate the legal and perhaps neighborly concerns of certain industries?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I'd say if you've exhausted your energy efficiency option, maybe on site, you haven't got enough real estate to be able to make it work, and you've got a community or a group that you want to partner with, there are community solution providers who can come in and build an asset that will provide the whole community with access to energy. We don't necessarily specialize in that, but we have partners in our network who do. And then in addition to that, there are things called virtual power purchase agreements and renewable energy credits. So if you can't get an energy system at all, but you want to be able to offset your emissions, there are ways of contractually sourcing energy that it doesn't give you operational benefits. So you're still going to lose power if the grid goes down, but contractually you can buy energy that is cleaner or greener, or you can buy credits to offset your emissions. So we can support businesses to assess what percentage of their energy needs can be achieved with efficiency, on-site energy, off-site power purchase agreements, or RECs. So we certainly support that. But yeah, there's great suppliers in the industry today that cover the whole gamut. So if a business is interested in doing something, there's always a solution of some sort. And so what we want to support businesses to do is make sure they go down the right avenue for them and connect with the right people in the market to do it. Yeah.
I'm certainly seeing the possibilities, but I'm curious, how are you making or gaining traction when there are some voices in the media that get more attention simply because of who they are and their personal brands, and advocate for things like moving our most polluting industries off to another planet and things of that nature? Obviously, you have a solution that is quite realistically feasible given the technologies that we have today. But
Yep.
How do you compete against the voices that seem to get more traction in media?
Yeah, this is a major challenge in the market. I think education is a huge barrier to business leaders globally. And messaging, it results in that just complete confusion. And you're right, a big part of what we try and do is educate the market, provide good content. And a lot of our industry peers are trying to do the same because the technologies, the construction capabilities, the capital all exist to get this done. How do you do it in a really efficient, cost-effective, time-effective manner? And this is where we do need to come together as a community, as an industry. We need to work with the right groups to ensure that we continue to educate. I'd still say we're dealing with the early adopter businesses who see the opportunity and they want to differentiate and they want to be ahead of their peers. And they know that maybe what they're doing today isn't going to necessarily be the right solution 10 years from now, but they're taking action and they're gaining benefit. And then they can continue to optimize and improve around that. And I think as more and more of those businesses do that and we socialize the positive case stories and success stories, that's when the snowball will really build, because business leaders trust each other versus trusting the market. And so the more and more business leaders we have singing the praises of positive outcomes, the better. I think it's the opposite right now. Unfortunately, a lot of businesses have made these commitments and now they're being called out for greenwashing because they've bought carbon offsets and they haven't actually done anything to reduce their emissions. They're just trying to offset them. And so now this is forcing people to maybe take a step back from making the commitments, which I prefer people to make big commitments and make progress towards it and maybe not quite hit them, then now get so scared of making the commitments that they're afraid to do anything. So I think we also need to celebrate the businesses that are putting themselves out there and making these audacious commitments that may feel completely unattainable today, because we don't know what's going to change, what new technologies are going to appear and how we're going to get there. But by taking action, we can start making progress towards those goals.
Do you see moves that would force companies to ensure that their energy production and perhaps supply chains or the provision of services is secured by having energy backup in place? And I'm not just talking about putting a bunch of generators, but perhaps renewable energy sources, a bit like security compliance requirements are required for those online companies that move data around between particular platforms. Is something similar not in the realm of impossibility in the near future?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually. And I think certainly from an emissions perspective, we're starting to see that Europe's very far ahead. Here in the US, the SEC is going to start requiring public companies to on what their emission profiles are. So we're certainly seeing the emission side impacting the industry. And we're seeing companies writing into their contracts with their suppliers, you have to develop science-based targets. You have to show us how you're achieving it. And if you don't, then you're not going to get contracts. And I think you're spot on. I think in terms of reliability, resilience, supply chain security, these are going to be expectations that roll down. I don't think we'll probably see it from a regulatory standpoint, but we'll see it from a business contracting standpoint. And the most innovative and forward-thinking businesses will start writing those expectations into that. And like you say, particularly for things like data centers that have the 99.999% uptime requirements, they can't rely on the grid. And today they're relying on having a bunch of diesel generators sat there, never being used. You need to now permit them. You need to buy fuel for them. You need to test them. These are all operationally painful processes. And if we can offset that with battery storage or solar or gas turbine, these are all progressions in providing resilience without having essentially a dirty asset on site that's an operational pain to keep permitted.
So what about the rise of digital technologies and analytics? Does that have any input into how you're offering these energy transition services to businesses?
Yeah, I think this has been one of the big unlock features in the last few years. I think having access to more data, more software orientated technologies, these enabling technologies that support businesses to make smart decisions, to be able to capture their energy use data. This is all critical. And we talk about the energy transition being the 4Ds, which is distributed, digitalized, deregulated, and decarbonized. And so that digitalized piece is hugely similar. And I've written a few articles on this that you may have picked up on in terms of, I like to compare the energy transition to the digital transition. And we've all heard the terms Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. The energy industry is largely in a Web 1 mode today where it's read only. You're given the option to buy energy and that's kind of it. This was the days of us having access to the internet, but all we could do was read the information. We couldn't interact with it. The energy transition is starting to move into this Web 2 world where now it's read and write. You've got different contractual mechanisms. You can maybe put an on-site energy system in. You're starting to see a bit of a shift. But what we really need to get to is that Web3 future where you're in control of your own destiny. You own your own data. You're not the product in terms of the outcome that the sort of monopolized bodies are driving in terms of their business models. You own your own data. You own your own energy consumption profile. And you become a prosumer. So then you can have ways of transacting that energy with your neighbors, with your partners, with your local charity. You may be able to trade your carbon credits, trade your energy and get rewarded for that instead of just constantly being penalized for being a consumer. So how do we actually make energy fun, interesting, and make it a part of people's lives that they understand? Because today, most people don't look at their energy bills. They don't know what a kilowatt means, what a megawatt means. They don't know what commercial value it has for them. And so let's make it super interesting and let's move people into that world where they're in control of their own destiny.
Brilliant. And the technologies and applications that allow for that. The other thought I had was, while there's a lot of conversation about moving to renewable energy and things like solar panels, batteries, very much a part of the conversation, I'm also aware of the fact that solar panels have been around for a while now. And a lot of them are being replaced and ending up in the dump. And I read a couple of articles about people not knowing what to do with these solar panels because they're not easily renewable and they're just piling up. And it's a similar conversation I've had with a few people about EV batteries, from everything from cars through to perhaps ones that are being used to store energy. They need to be recycled or replaced at some point in time. A lot of these pieces of equipment perhaps use elements that are hard to find. And we've heard reports of unfair labor practices, etc., in order to acquire some of these metals that are being used in these components in these pieces of equipment. So from a sourcing perspective and a recycling perspective, do we need to be aware of these? Because could they potentially come back to bite us? And if we don't make the right move, taking those factors into consideration as well, how do you navigate that conversation?
Yeah, huge amount to unpack there. I think for the energy transition to be successful, there has to be a mining transition. And that is very exciting. We are going to need a huge amount more of these minerals, metals, precious commodities. The challenge being a lot of them are in locations that don't necessarily have the best practices today. And so it's incumbent on all of us and the biggest mining companies in the world to ensure that we have practices in place to mine these assets in a really sustainable way. So we are big advocates of supporting mine companies to be more sustainable themselves in the way that they extract, mine, maintain their assets and engage with their communities. So that's the first factor that we need to all be very cognizant of. This is going to be a challenge. Trying to get these mine sites permitted, operated in a timely manner is hard. For businesses who have procured these systems, we're already starting to see some of them who've had their panels for 15, 20 years coming to end of life and wanting to replace them. And we've personally experienced opportunities where our customer will say, as part of the scope that I want you to quote, I need you to remove the panels. And then I need to see how you're going to either have them recycled in the right way and or used in another location where maybe they don't need the same level of solar quality we do. And so just because the panel's 10, 15 years old and it's not producing at what it was designed for, doesn't mean it's not working. And it could be used at a school or in a disadvantaged community or somewhere that doesn't necessarily need the same level of capability, let's say. And so there are good recycling entities today for both solar and batteries. I think we're going to see a whole lot more of them. But there is also that kind of circular economy of where and how could we use these assets elsewhere to create value before we start trying to dispose of them or recycle them. Yeah, it's a super exciting opportunity. And maybe from a battery perspective, you can use it for your business or your car, and then you can use that same technology and use it for a different use case, which doesn't need the same level of battery capability that it was once designed for. And so I think we'll see a lot of refurbishment, a lot of reuse. And when the demand really mounts up, we'll see the businesses step up and find very good commercial ways to monetize that circular economy aspect. And I think coming back to your digitalization question before, this is also where we'll see the blockchain play a very critical role. Where were the minerals extracted? What was the carbon footprint? That being tracked, then it's put into a solar panel. What's the carbon footprint now look like once it's installed? And so we'll have that full life cycle tracking of where the products have come from, making sure that they're sustainably mined, responsibly mined, that they're being used and shipped in the right ways. And the businesses that are most progressive will be thinking about this from a supply chain perspective.
Certainly. So listening to what you've been saying, companies to embrace this way of thinking, it requires something of a culture change. I'd say not just from a leadership perspective, but really across the entire organization. I'm curious, are you helping facilitate that culture change within organizations so that people are increasingly aware of possibilities of energy transition? And so what does that look like?
Yeah, we're trying to do that from a perspective of making our platform accessible to whatever stakeholders in the business they want that. So everyone's got visibility into what are we considering? What are our options? Where do we get the greatest return on investment? Where is the project at in its life cycle? What's the next step? What's the value that's being created? Such that you can either have the executive dashboard that allows you to make very high level decisions right through to then the operators being able to see where is their project in the pipeline and how will it impact their specific business unit. So that's the way we're addressing it through technology. But certainly from a change management perspective, more broadly, I think there's a lot of opportunity for the industry to get involved in that. I think that's where we're replacing the consulting aspect of the energy transition, the actual technical outcome. But I think there's an opportunity for consultants and for progressive leaders within these businesses to really step up and educate, inform, take people on the journey, communicate the successes, use it in their marketing collateral to attract more good talent who also believe in it. But I think what we're largely seeing is some of the old school thinking retiring and leaving the industry, and a lot of the new talent that's coming in. This is already a minimum expectation. And so I think the change management will become less and less hard as the new generations are filtering through these businesses, because it's not an if, it's an why aren't we doing it yet? And we should be getting after it. I think we're seeing that very generationally.
Very interesting. So it's really about education and enabling technologies. Is your platform available for people worldwide, or is this UK specific?
Actually, US and Australia are where we've done the most work to date, but we've worked in Africa, Europe, Southeast Asia, South America. So yeah, any commercial industrial business leader who is thinking about the energy transition, we're certainly here to support them on that journey.
And are you finding that there's perhaps a couple of areas around this energy transition piece that doesn't get talked about very much. If so, what will they be?
Yeah, good one. I'd say the three big misconceptions in the market that probably aren't being talked about enough today is solar's seen as being the holy grail. And a lot of businesses don't realize that solar alone today, it doesn't add any resilience because if the grid goes down, unless you can store and shut off your own solar and control it on your asset, it also has to be turned off. So people wonder why when the power's gone off and they've got solar panels, their power has also gone off. So that's the first misconception, is solar only is going to solve all their problems, and it likely won't. The second one is batteries are too expensive, and so I'm not going to consider that. Batteries have come down in cost over 80% in the last 10 years. They're now almost a very perfect combining technology to whether it's solar or a gas turbine or a wind turbine. Like that really provides you a huge amount of flexibility, resilience, and the ability to really manage your commercial model. And I'd say the third is that sustainability reduces your profitability. And so they are probably the three biggest areas that we need to address as a community, because profitable outcomes will be achieved through sustainable behaviors. We just need to make sure it's done in the right way. And that is the key to this, is we can't just knee-jerk reaction and think, let's throw some panels on the roof and we can report it, market it. Everyone's going to be happy. We're going to achieve all the best outcomes. Let's make sure it's done in a smart, purposeful way where we engage with the right partners for the long term, because these are long-term solutions. And we do it either using our own capital, but we take advantage of the incentives that are available to reduce our tax burdens, or we use someone else's capital and we get all these benefits without having to spend a penny up front. These are solutions that are available. And I think a lot of businesses don't realize that it's very easily accessible at a very good price point when done right.
And very enlightening. Thank you for that. I'd like to ask you a different sort of question, given the nature of your business. Is there a tool that you find quite indispensable to what it is you do with the Vector? If so, what would it be?
In terms of our product itself?
In terms of your internal processes and things of that nature.
Yes. Someone else's product that we use.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like from a technical perspective, there's great technologies in the market that help do some of their technical optimization. So we use a product called Xendee, XENDEE, as well as NREL, which is a national renewable energies lab here in the US. They've got a really nice product that we use. From just a day-to-day operational perspective, we love Slack. We love Zoom Info. Zoom Info is how we get access to a lot of contacts. And then we're using Firefly.ai a lot right now to help with us continuously improving our outreach, tracking our meetings, getting our scripts, continuously improving our sales process. So AI is a super interesting spot. I actually use AI for some of my social media. I've trained my own AI assistant to speak like me and put out content like me. And so we're going to see a lot more opportunity in this space to take huge amounts of data, a lot of competing complex needs, and apply some very smart techniques to provide valuable insights to customers.
Xendee, what does it do?
Xendee is like a techno-financial optimization engine that engineers can use to design energy solutions.
Okay. And was this brought in early on at the time of creating Vector, or is it something more recently that you've transitioned into?
Yep. So we've got quite a unique founding story in that I was part of a large corporation, Worley. We entrepreneurially concocted the idea of Vector. We partnered with Xendee, and then we spun out the business as a standalone business, but with Worley supporting us from a financial and technical perspective, and Xendee from a software integration perspective. And then we've developed from there and built our own IP and our own marketplace infrastructure. But I think it just demonstrates that you don't have to bootstrap something in your garage, especially for something that's so complex and hard. I think for people who are sat within large corporations, if you can internally sell an opportunity and show the potential return on investment and the growth opportunity and the fact that it wouldn't necessarily work within the corporation, it's a really good case study for thinking outside the box and creating an entirely new business, but with the backing of one of the largest engineering firms in the world who saw that we were going to automate a lot of the consulting and engineering workload in the industry. And so how do they get a clip of that ticket knowing that they can't build it themselves because there's a conflict of interest?
So was that Zendy being used by Worley at the time? Is that how you came across it? Or
Yep. So I was leading our global power consulting business, and we were using Zendy as the technology to help us do things quicker, smarter, faster for our customers at the time. So instead of charging hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars to do an on-site energy assessment and a one-time snapshot of that opportunity, we started using their technology. And then we've refined that through Vector. And now it's all about how do you provide customers with that real-time insight into their energy transition journey, because stuff's changing all the time. So if you've got a consulting glossy report that's a one-off, it's very challenging to then use that a year or two from now. Whereas if your data's in a platform that's looking at how are the utility rates changing, how are the prices of solar and storage changing, what's the price of gas going to do to my business? If interest rates change, how does that impact? So being able to do all that dynamically is very exciting.
And is there a reason why you haven't transitioned to perhaps a newer platform, or is it just that you're internally more comfortable with Zendy and have decided to stick with it?
Yeah, we built our own IP now that we use heavily. There's lots of good tools out there. They are all designed to enable the supply side of the market to sell more product to customers. What we've done is we've taken all the great ideas and concepts and packaged it in such a way that we've generated our own IP that is designed to empower the energy buyer, the business leaders. They are not technical users. They don't want to be hands-on tools. So how do we give them the insights and the ideas, the action-orientated progress without having to be an energy expert? So that's the key to how we built the product.
Terrific. And with that, is there perhaps an aspect to the platform that most people are unaware of? If so, what would that be?
Yeah, I'd say at the core, we are a marketplace that enables you to competitively source the right solution for you with the guaranteed best price, best outcome. In order to get there, the bit that most people don't realize we have is we've got a platform that allows you to put your dozens, hundreds, thousands of sites into the product, and with very little information inputted required by you yourselves, the listeners, we can very quickly, in a matter of minutes to hours, actually prioritize your whole portfolio and show you where you get the greatest return on investment. So we are firm believers in let's kill bad projects early and often. So not every project is going to make sense. So let's not waste anyone's time, energy, money going after that. There's too much wastage in the industry. Let's focus on the projects that make the most sense, and let's prioritize that return on investment to get those profitable outcomes. And then that becomes now your data set to drive all other actions, because now you've baselined, where am I consuming energy today? How much am I consuming? What's my emission profile? And then where can I get the greatest impact for making a change to that? So that's super exciting. That's a new product in the last 6 months. And that really starts to unlock the whole market, because without that, our customers don't know what to ask the market for. And so the marketplace becomes useless without enabled buyers being able to tell the market what they want them to quote.
Absolutely. This has been very enlightening and fascinating. Gareth, if to wrap things up, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
Top takeaway would be, don't be on the losing side of the energy transition equation. Set your business up for success in the long term. Energy is the most critical input to the sustainable operations of your asset. It is the lifeblood of our economies. Without it, the consequences are pretty dire. And don't be at the mercy of the energy transition extortion mechanism, which is energy costs going up, carbon credit costs going up. You don't want to be trying to offset your emissions, paying more for those offsets while your energy is also going up, because now you're a double whammy hit. So let's drive those win-win outcomes of more reliable, more cost-effective, more sustainable solutions.
And if listeners are curious and want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend they head to?
Yep. So our website, www.vecta.com is a really great resource for blogs, education materials, newsletters, what we do, how we do it. And then for me personally, very active on LinkedIn. If you look for Gareth Evans, Vecta, you'll find me. Would love to hear from you. Drop me a message, comment on a post. I'll be there.
Terrific. We'll include links to that in the show notes. Gareth, thank you so much for doing this. It's been terrific.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to connecting again soon.